A-level students. So I was reading this article this morning about Walmart, and big is beautiful and it screams economies of scale, and it made me think of economies of scale and how this is one of those overused terms by A-level students, and often it's not contextualised. So it sounds like it's a bit technical, and therefore students tend to drop it into essays. You have to contextualise everything, we know that. The aim of this video is to go through some of the different types of economies of scale and economies of scope, and then there's a 10 marker. So looking through this article, which I've put in here, I've also dropped in some of their changing operating income over a period of time as well. And here's an opportunity for you to do 30 marks in 35 minutes. We will explore this question. I won't explore the others, but you should be practicing time conditions at the moment. So I'm sure you can find 35 minutes in a day to read through this, plan your answers, and good luck. Hope you enjoy that. So the first question up here is looking at limitations of technological investments. And obviously we'll look at the economies of scale in depth in a second. And then down here, they intend to use some of their stores as delivery hubs, a distribution question. And this year's research theme, obviously to do with the clothing industry, investments in technology, economies of scale, and, delivery distributions, logistics chains are obviously going to be coming up, let's face it. So this is quite useful for paper 3 this year, is probably what I'm trying to say to you. So looking at the question, so let's have a quick look at this one. So we've got likely value is going to be the first part of our hook. So we'll put a H next to that. We'll do this again in a sec. Of investing in improving economies of scale. Obviously this is our knowledge, and because it's investing in improving it, that's what we're going to be looking for in the case study. And it's linked to their aim, which is a quote from the article, of reduce unit economic costs by 20%. Okay, so we know what they want to achieve, we know what's going to go on the end of chain of arguments, but first of all, let's look at the different types of economies of scale. So here's our basic definition that we would sort of use, hopefully in context, and this is very textbooky, and we know by gaining these cost advantages, we might be able to use those. This could be just giving extra dividends, obviously sourced through profits, to our shareholders. Walmart is an equivalent of a PLC. They have shareholders, and you'll notice from the article they've been giving dividends every year since they basically opened. Okay, very popular with shareholders, and that's why their share price has gone up. If you read the original article, you'll see the share price has gone up quite a lot in recent years. And it could be that it's a very price sensitive market and they decide to pass that on to customers, but don't default to that argument. That's quite a lazy argument that you'll see in lots of students' essays, and they think that everyone wants to discount because they remember the rules of supply and demand. If I lower the price, I'll increase my sales. Well, if you lower your price, you might change your market position. And companies like Walmart, they're already seen as being those leaders to do with price, but also location and range. A Walmart, these stores are massive generally. And so you have to think about how they might not pass on those costs. Maybe they'll use the profits to invest in the software with Microsoft, for example. So don't always default to let's discount so we can increase sales. It's a very short-term strategy. Unless you explain it, maybe the prices go up later. Maybe it's just about getting market share, which is one of their key aims. So we need to know why. Well, we need to think about certain things. So it's the scale of fixed costs. So if our fixed costs aren't changing, if we don't see fixed costs changing, we can talk about how this can be spread out more over the entire business, possibly if we're growing the business even more. there's lots of things that we're going to be looking for. So we'll be looking for cost advantages, looking for ways of improving efficiency, all of it linked to the economies of scale. But then what are we going to do? Well, the likely value of this, and we can see that the aim, according to the question, is obviously lowering their costs. Okay? Might be something else in different essays, by the way. So, first one to look at, technical economies of scale. Well, this is a robot sweeping the floor in Walmart. And yes, there's initial investment in the technology. This is going to be the standard argument, isn't it? These things cost a lot of money. However, they can sweep the floors all the time. They won't phone in sick. They won't get pregnant. They won't go on strike if you don't pay them enough. So by removing people from the shop floor, we either don't need that member of staff anymore, or the member of staff can be doing other things. It could be that the floors are generally cleaner in Walmart because these robots are constantly sweeping them. There's lots of things that we could be doing with that, but the economies of scale here, linked to the definition, is reducing costs. Well, initial cost expensive, long-term cost, now we don't need to pay someone to sweep the floors. That lowers our overheads. Purchasing economies of scale are obviously a favourite with most students with bulk purchasing. And if you think about McDonald's, where the McDonald's franchise, part of the deal of being a franchisee is that you have to buy all of your ingredients from McDonald's. And that means my onion will come through pre-chopped. It's standardised. McDonald's know what they want onion to look like in their burgers. And also, if McDonald's are buying all the onion chopped centrally, they should be able to get it at a rock bottom price. Okay? This helps them to reduce their costs. Managerial, it could be that we're bringing in specialist people that understand certain things about how the company will work. It might be you bring in this change agent who specialises in certain things to bring through our 20% cost savings. It could just be a consultant that comes in from one of the, Deloitte, PwC, Accenture type companies, and they come in and they focus on a project to help Walmart reduce their costs, that managerial specialism. And then at the end of the cost saving activity, they leave. Financial. Now, these large companies, remember, they've got massive buying power in some ways. So if they wanted to get finance from a bank or private investors, now companies like Walmart are going to look like they're a sound investment. The likelihood of them not repaying the money is probably quite low, which means they can command lower interest rates. Now, if these interest rates are lower than competitors, it gives them economies of scale and that competitive advantage. Okay, so think about that as a power linked to risk of return on investment for the people loaning the money. Marketing economies of scale are another favourite of students, and we've got Coca-Cola as an example here. And if we think about it, Coca-Cola have standardised advertising campaigns in multiple countries. They might make one advert that works for the UK and the US. We all speak the same language, sort of. And actually our cultures are very similar. So it could be one advert in two big Coca-Cola drinking countries. Therefore, you're saving money on those marketing costs. Network. So if we think about the industries, so we've got these industries that will work together on certain projects. And sometimes the value, so Facebook's the example here, it could be the value of the information that you get from that network of people actually helps improve the product itself. So the information encourages other users to use the network gets bigger, you get more information, and then more users want to use the network. And the secret to Facebook's change in profit fortunes not so many years ago was the evolution of 3 and 4G. People started using Facebook on their mobiles, and then Facebook started actually making money through ad revenue. So if it wasn't for the number of users, then they wouldn't have a viable business model. But as the users grew, the algorithm got better, more people wanted to use the service, self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, if we think about those external economies of scale, this is really important for the clothing industry, for example, where we see certain locations specializing in textiles, for example. So there are cities in China that specialize. This has been led by the government. They understand economies of scale linked to location. So the example I've put in here is Silicon Valley, where there might be loads of skilled people working in the IT industry, and if they leave one company and go to another, well, maybe you've got that knowledge transfer going on between companies. Yeah, so if you look at back onto China and HP, Hewlett Packard, they've built a village where people live, and it is just there to service the mass amounts of people they need working in their factories. If they leave HP, they'll go down the road to another computer company. Okay, so location is very important aspect of country as a production location for paper 3 this year. And then we've got economies of scope. And if you think about it, we're dealing with, in the Walmart case study, I've put Google as an example here, but in the Walmart case study, they're going into pharmaceuticals, they're going into finance. So if you imagine you've got the massive buying power of Walmart, but they've also got massive buying power for now pharmacies, instead of letting another company come in to run their pharmacies. So you can get economies of scale across these diversified markets, which means if you see fluctuations in one of them up or down, then the others might be able to pick up the slack, or vice versa. So you've got those sorts of things. Now the Google one is really interesting, because if you think about what they do, search, email, cloud storage, and advertising, and lots more advertising with everything that we're thinking and putting on online, you've got those shared infrastructure costs. So the cloud computing systems that they will use, all of those services use. It's a bit like the pharmacies in a Walmart. The Walmart is already there, the pharmacy is in the corner of the Walmart. So you've got shared economies of scale, and hopefully leading to a 20% reduction in their costs. So on to the question, likely value of first part of the hook, that's a H, sort of investing in improving economies of scale. We're going to aim to look at what that is in the case study, and we know that it is linking to this cost reduction. So we know that needs to come up our chains of argument. Now this is a 10 marker, so this is a nice 10 marker. It's likely value. P, good value. P, counter argument, possible downsides. Overall, answer the question, make sure you're using the hooks, and then spend a bit of time on your justification and consider the alternative with this one. The alternative seems a bit obvious, not investing in economies of scale. So start off with a contextualised definition. Now, economies of scale is a bit of a gobful in my opinion, and I would, for the first time, I would write economies of scale. I put EOS in brackets, and then from then onwards, I'm going to be using EOS. My advice is to write the words first, then that, not just write EOS. It's not like GDP. GDP, I'm not going to write it longhand, then abbreviate it. GDP is GDP. EOS, make sure you write it properly. So economies of scale are cost advantages that Walmart can obtain due to its size. These savings come from the increased output of goods, selling more stuff, and services which decrease the per unit cost. Now, the reason we've got a good definition there is we've got per unit costs, we've got increased outputs, we've got cost advantages. It's all in our definition, which sort of structures our answer. So we need 3 chains of argument for a 10 marker. They need to be contextualised. We need balance. We're aiming for level 4, not for perfection, remember. So let's go into the first one. By investing in growing its network of over 105,000 stores, Walmart can use its buying power, nice Porter's link in there, to negotiate better prices from suppliers. Underlined and in bold is a chain of argument, directly lowering costs of goods sold. This type of economy of scale can help them achieve a 20% reduction in costs. So we've got the hook directly at the end of the paragraph. It also enables me to have another chain of argument in there, and we've got negotiate better prices and lowering costs. So one of the economies of scale was economies of scale of bulk purchasing. We looked for that when we looked into the case study. That's why we needed to revise our different types of economies of scale before answering the question. You'll notice it says by investing. We're not just saying an example of an economy of scale, and it's a growing network. Okay, so it's not just investing in their stores, might get away with that, but it's also investing in a growing network. Counter argument to the point that we've just had, possibly using a different economy of scale. However, Walmart aims to improve its economy of scale further through technological investments by developing new retail software tools with Microsoft. Nice quotation marks around it to make it obvious you've used the case study. The investments required are substantial, and the cost savings may not be immediate or as large as projected, because it's a forecast, isn't it? We're going to question the reliability of that data, meaning Walmart may not achieve its 20% cost reduction. It's a bit obvious that we're coming back to the question at the end of each chain of argument. In conclusion, let's answer the question. The economies of scale are likely to provide considerable value to Walmart's goal of reducing unit economic costs by 20%. The hook is likely value. This says it's valuable. Okay, we've answered the question. So far, good definition, setting the scene. We are demonstrating understanding and knowledge. Here, 3 chains of argument contextualised, and comes back to the hook in the question. Same thing here, counter argument, questioning the reliability of forecasted value of the investment. Even though we don't know how much this computer software is going to cost them, it's going to cost them a lot. Overall, we've answered the question, and we've linked into, again, the hook to make it absolutely obvious that we're answering the question. Then we need justification that considers the alternative. Without investing in improvements in economies of scale, such as technology, Walmart's large global network of stores risks experience diseconomies of scale, because that would be a good counter argument for this being so big. The size that allows for economies of scale can also increase complexity, inefficiency, and rising per unit costs, making it harder to achieve its 20% reduction target. Okay, so we've come back to the hook in the question. Now, all of this sounds quite textbooky. Okay, 20% cost reductions in the question, so that's not context. Now, this does have context in it. This needs to have context in it for it to count. So, large global network of stores. This is application, because they're a global company and it says it in the case study. Okay, so is it perfect? Probably not. Is it level 4? So as a quick reminder, we've got a likely impact, likely value in this question. We can go for a slightly shorter version as long as it's balanced. It's not one of these mean ones, so we don't have to put howevers on the end of it. Some people will write this structure because they write quickly. Now, what we're most interested in is here. Does it demonstrate in context knowledge? Yes. Have we got a minimum of 3 chains of argument in each of these paragraphs? Is it balanced? Well, it is definitely balanced in here. And also, we've got an answer here, and then we've considered the alternative. There's a bit more balance there. And we've used quantitative and qualitative. Yeah, we've quoted the quantitative, not really used it, but it's an important part of it. And shows an awareness of competing arguments leading to a supported judgment. And this is the bit, remember, that some students struggle with. It's supporting that judgment instead of just telling me what the judgment is and repeating a previous point. I think it achieves all of that. And if you do, then you would award it 10. If you think, well, maybe it's not quite achieved something in there, as long as it's in level 4, then we're happy. Bottom of level 4 is 70%. And hope you enjoyed that.